All right, everybody, we are back for the Coach's Compass episode number. We don't even know. Like we said, we just been rolling. Another special guest with us today. It's your boy, Coach Coop, my boy Jay. All of us today are reporting live from Europe. We got another proper lad with us today, a guy out of the UK named Matt Solomon. Like I said, he's out of the UK, currently in the Netherlands, strength and conditioning coach, also a sports scientist, works with Paralympic athletes, right, in the Netherlands, which are getting ready for the Summer Games this year in 2024. Also a host on the podcast called Science for Sport. Welcome, Matt, to the Coach's Compass. Bro, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been it's been a great to catch up for 12 minutes to start with and speak to you guys. Nice little refreshing start to the day instead of just sitting with admin. So thank you very much.
Of course, bro. It's glad that you got to get on. I know you got a super busy schedule. Like every one of the strength and conditioning coaches, like we like to jam pack our schedules and say that it's really cool, but we also get super tired by the end of the day. And then you're going on holiday tomorrow, right? Getting the chance to go down to Croatia, which is great. You know, a lot of coaches don't take a break. It's good to take a break. But on top of that is a very important month. It is Mental Health Month. Not that it just will only be 1 month. But, bro, how are you doing? Like, how is everything going in Matt's life?
Shit, man. I didn't see that on the question list. Good and bad. Good and bad. So, last year was a tough year. This year is an improving year, so that's positive. Trying to work out whether I stay here in the Netherlands or whether I bugger off somewhere else. Whether I want to change jobs, whether I want to stay with what I'm doing. Great job. Sitting here on my own every weekend by myself is less fun. But yeah, I mean, the summers in Europe are good, and that makes everything way easier. So if you ask me now, I'm like, oh yeah, sun's shining, let's go. We've got Paralympics coming up. There's lots to work towards and work for. If you ask me in like middle of February, I'm like, get me out. I need to not be here. I don't know, do you guys have the same when like you got like 5 months of pure grey, and all of a sudden you're like,
yeah. Especially for myself being from Florida, like I'm not used to being far from the water, one, and two, like these long ass winters. Like the winters here are long. Like I didn't want to believe it when I first got over here when people talked about winter depression. I'm like, bro, you guys are being soft. Like it can't be that long. It can't be that bad. Because in Florida, you got like maybe 1 month, 2 months of kind of winter. But I got over here and it was like, it's a solid 6 months that you don't really see the sun and it's rainy and like it's cold and you're always wearing a big jacket and then I get what you're saying, bro. Like that February time, you're like, yo, when does this shit end? Like, when do I get to see the sun? When do I get to go outside and like live? So I fully understand about wanting to figure out what is next for you and everything. But what even got you into strength and conditioning?
That's a good question. I suppose like most people, like I failed at being good at athletic stuff. So I played football or soccer for you guys. And I was all right at that, but definitely not good enough to ever make a living out of it. And I remember my mom speaking to me, it's like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'm like, I feel 14, 15 years old. I'm like, oh, and I can't do that. Well, I could. I mean, not that bad. No, but you're not going to make it. And I just remember being stubborn and being like, I'm going to make it. I was like, obviously you're not. But after that, I was kind of like, well, what do I want to do? Because I like sport. I want to stay in that. I want to be in that environment. It's what I've grown up in. And in the UK at the time, there was things like physio, sports science, nutrition, but maybe not the breadth of education that you can have now with loads of specific things going on. I chose physiotherapy and I was like, right, I'm going to be a physio. And then I did some work experience as a physio, which was literally just old people's feet and their smelly bloody, it was horrible. And I was like, I don't want to do this. This sucks. This is smelly old people. And I can't imagine smelly young people being a lot better. I don't want to touch people's feet after they've just been outside for an hour and a half in the sun. So I kind of looked a bit further and realized that sports science was a thing. And at that point, I was like, right, okay, sports science involves touching way fewer people's feet, which is great. And potentially I can do some interesting stuff with teams. So I was like, right, okay, I'll do that. And then went through the degree process. And afterwards, all right, okay, well, I'm completely unemployable, so I need to do a master's. Did a master's and still realized I was completely unemployable. And yeah, at that time I was kind of like, I got into the gym, and I was in the gym since 16, but like then I was like actually into the gym, and realized that coaching people was fun, and yeah, started to upskill myself in that, and eventually, yeah, just started reaching out to people and saying, look, I want to work with you for free. I want to come volunteer with you guys. And at that point, I'd moved to the Netherlands, and yeah, I got an opportunity with Vitesse Arnhem as a football team here. And yeah, from there it just kind of flowed. So what got me into it, to answer your question, is just a passion for sport and a hatred for people's feet. And then yeah, after that it just kind of started rolling. It's like I get to just talk to people all day and tell them to lift weights. I mean, that's just pretty easy, right? Like it's I mean, it's not obviously, but like there's
Yeah, I mean,
a certain degree of, there's worse things you can do.
yeah, there's way where, I mean, you could be rubbing people's feet right now. You know what I mean?
Exactly, it's grim. It's grim. And they have horrible toenails.
I'm one of them that has awful toenails, so I wouldn't
I'm
want
not
you
going
to.
to rub your feet.
Don't worry, bro. I ain't gonna ask. I ain't pulling up to the Netherlands to get my feet rubbed. But
Good.
what exactly, like, could you? What is sports science? You know, because there's a lot of people out there that have no clue like what exactly sports science is.
That's really broad, right? So a sports science degree might have things like nutrition and all the way down to psychology, and like I remember doing modules on like oxidative stress. I mean, that's completely unnecessary for a practical job, but right, okay, you get super specific in all kinds of free radical pathways, and I don't think that that's necessarily sports science in its purest form. But if I look at what I do in terms of sports science, you have the side which is like an academic, write papers, be a clever person side, and you have a pragmatic side, which is much more like, right, how do we make people bigger, stronger, faster? And using science to do that. So it's not necessarily just lifting weights in the weight room. It's right, okay, let's test someone using something which is relevant to their sport, let's say speed. And how are we going to then use that test to change some kind of training intervention to make them better? So examples might be testing them for speed every, I don't know, we use every 4 months, for example, which is a long time, but you could do less. And we look at trends over time. So let's say it's a 16-year-old who comes in, and we go, right, over 3-4 years, we've made you X amount quicker. So that would be a really simple example of how you use sports science. It's just test, intervention, retest. And it's not to write a study. It's not to be an academic. It's just to see where that person is and how we can improve that person. So you got the simple stuff like that, but you could also be doing maybe more complex stuff. I remember there was an athlete who was recovering from long COVID, and we don't test for lactate or anything like that. So that's not a standard test battery, but we went to the physiologist and said, look, this person is suffering from like really heavy arms, loads of lactate buildup when they compete in the sport, wheelchair basketball. And we said, right, okay, we want to test this. How are we going to do it? So we sit with the physiologist and we look at previous protocols, and we design a new protocol because it needs to be upper body, and do the lactate test. You prick your ear and take blood and basically see with a profile, when you increase the exercise intensity, what happens to the blood lactate, and therefore how do they respond to exercise. And using that data, we were then able to then design training interventions. So in this case, we basically split the high intensity and the low intensity stuff, and gave a polarized model of training. And then in, I think it was like 4 weeks, and another 4 weeks we tested again, and we were able to then see that progression. So there would be like field-based tests, like really practical, solving problems, as opposed to writing papers and saying that, I don't know, hip thrust improves sprint performance for 16-year-old athletes. Whatever, like, yeah, they lifted weights. We knew they're going to get better. My sports science is much more applied and much more, how do we solve the problem? So it could be testing like that, but also things like monitoring. So we have an indoor, it's like an indoor GPS system. You know, like athletes have those kind of like GPS systems on the back. We've got the same indoors, and we can then see what they're doing on a daily basis. So how quickly they move, the accelerations they make, decelerations, that kind of stuff. And we put that all into graphs and tables, and then I communicate that with the coaches, and we can then change training design to make sure that we're optimizing that process. And the training that we're doing is then matching the demands of the sport itself. So not that we just train really easily the whole time, not that we train too intensely, but there's some kind of combination of those factors. So yeah, it's broad. There's a lot of things going on. It can be testing, it can be monitoring, it can be reporting, but the goal is to pragmatically improve performance using some kind of scientific process.
With all that said, how have you seen the cohesion between, I guess, like sports specific coaches, the strength coaches, and then the sports science guys? Because I've seen it more so like in the soccer world here, where it's like a lot of these teams that have like a sports science lab. You have the position coaches or like the sports specific coaches, and then you have the strength coaches, and it's like sometimes there is no like integration between the three, and it's like these guys think this, and then the position coach is usually who reigns, so it's like he makes the decision on everything, and it's like there is no communication. So, like, what have you kind of seen in your history with?
So where I work now, I'm the strength coach and the sports scientist, which makes things easier because I agree with myself often. But generally speaking, what happens in my scenario is that I will see the coaches on Monday, so they'll be in giving sessions. I'm not with the team all the time, so my hours are split, which means I'm limited as to just I can't just sit there and watch training because I need to do 100,000 of them. But I'll see them on Monday, catch up with them, be like, right, okay. Monday morning, I'll make reports. So before the athletes get in, we've done their wellness and training load reports, and I send that to the coaches and say, look, pay attention to athlete ABC, athlete 1, 2, 3, they can have a little bit more, and 4, 5, 6 can have a bit less, whatever. Then I'll see them, catch up with them, and then they'll give me more information from the athletes. Tuesday, we sit again and we discuss what we did on Monday. And then on Friday, we'll sit again and discuss the week backwards and then forwards for the next week. So in that sense, it's quite well integrated for at least for a program which isn't full-time, or the program is full-time, but where I'm not full-time with that one thing. So what you're alluding to is the bottleneck, right? Like you can do all of the data collection, but if you can't communicate that data and the coaches are unwilling to do anything with that data, then you might as well just chill out and not do that. The key thing is if you're able to create a system whereby, for us, for example, we discuss Monday what should be done, and on Tuesday we reflect on that and see whether it was done. You can hold the coaches quite easily accountable for what's happening, right? So if we say this is going to be, according to our periodization, a heavy training week, and on Monday morning everyone's got a green light, everyone feels good, they're ready to go. Tuesday, I sit with the coaches and say, look, well, we didn't do that. Like, you know how to do this. Why didn't we do this? Was it a tactical or a technical reason? And what can we do now to make sure that the training stimulus is sufficient to hit our periodization goals? And if not, do we need to change the periodization? Like if, I don't know, 2 or 3 players, this week's a great example. 2 or 3 players were missing due to illness, and we couldn't have an intense week like we wanted to, or at least not in the first couple of days. Like, do we throw that away, or do we keep trying to make it difficult for the ones that are there? Do we accept the fact that those players actually their technical level is really high, which means the quality of the training goes up when they're there, and therefore when they're missing, the quality goes down, and therefore the intensity goes down? Do we accept those factors, or do we then supplement those with, for example, conditioning or games? Or, for example, we're quite lucky, we can, with the women's team, we can bring in either youth athletes or male athletes to then provide extra training stimuli. So it could be so that the women miss 1 or 2 players, and we pull up a 22, 23-year-old from the men's talent team to come and fill a gap. And that obviously changes the training, and it's not the same as playing with our top women, but that person can provide a physical stimulus and a technical stimulus, which you might have previously been missing. So those different kind of manipulations are things that we can play with. And ultimately that comes down to what the coaches are able to do and to understand, and what I can communicate with them. So if I recommend, for example, that this week should be heavy, it's not being heavy, we should be working hard and it's not happening, how can we do that? Well, let's say we play 5 versus 5 games, basketball, or we do a little bit extra conditioning every single day. Like those are 2 pretty solid options. And it might not be the same as what we wanted. It might not be the plan on Monday, but we're getting closer to the plan than if we just gave up and said, well, we'll just take it easy this week.
How hard has it
What are
been
the,
for?
my bad, Coop. Yeah,
You
I
good?
got
No,
voice
no,
scientist on.
yeah. But how hard has it been to get the coaches, like your position coaches, and like all that stuff, to like actually buy into this and actually listen to like what you're saying, like for this to actually function and work and flow correctly?
It takes time. Like, yeah, the buy-in is the big thing. I think when you get results, then it helps. So, an example from a conversation we had earlier this week, and we're going to have again this afternoon. But in the build up to Paris, we're likely to change from 2 gym sessions a week to 1 gym session a week for strength maintenance and 2 power sessions. So at the start of the training, like I kind of sell it as a warm up, but it's some like reasonable power work. That's the likely change we're going to make, and I need to sell that. But because we've had success with that previously, selling that's pretty easy. And then going on a journey with the coaches, like, I mean, it sounds manipulative and it's not, but like I know that I'm going to have to sell this. So they came back from a training camp in China, and I was like, right, okay, so what happened in China, which was good? What happened, which was bad? How are we going to address those problems? Like, tell me about how fit they were and what they were missing. And I kind of led them down a path, and they were really open and like, okay, we're missing this, this, and this. I'm like, those things are the things that we can address now, and this is how we can do that. So if you're missing a little bit of that sharpness, it's logical. I mean, we're 3-4 months away from the games. If you're missing that sharpness and a little bit of power and a little bit of maybe assertiveness on the court and aggressiveness, then we can work on some of those factors in the gym. Not all of it. We can't just make someone an assertive human being, but we can work on the physical side of power production. So if that's what we're missing, why don't we try what we've done previously, which has worked, A, B, and C? And that makes a sell way easier. So having success, I mean, it's easier said than done, right? But having success with a certain system or a method allows you to then repeat that potentially or sell that in a more easy way. But generally speaking, that's taken me years to get to that point, right? It's not just I didn't just walk in on day one and they're like, oh, well, listen to what you're saying. It helps to have some kind of reputation. So now if I go to other teams, they listen a little bit quicker because I've built that up over time. And you have to kind of build that relationship, right? So the head coaches who, let's say you got a head coach who's a pain in the ass, like don't want to do anything, they don't want to listen. Like, well, you can pretty much just keep asking why until they conclude the logical conclusion, which you're probably drawing. That you can lead them down that path, and then eventually it might be close to their idea that they're thinking, actually, we do need to produce more power, and I'm there in this case to tell people how to produce power. So, for example, I don't want to be producing power on Friday afternoon when they've had 10 training sessions. I want to be doing that when they're fresh. So we want Monday morning, for example. And because there's no or limited residual fatigue from a session like that, and you can, within 20 minutes, 30 minutes, give them a good stimulus, like I can then sell that idea to them. Like, you want this is the physical quality that you want. Well, in order to have that physical quality, you need these conditions. And that makes the sell a lot more of an easier process when it's their idea, right? I'm just then effectively consulting for physiological variables and fatigue management. And when you can not manipulate the situation, but when you can design the situation to hit the things which you want, it makes it so much easier. And I'm not a communication expert with coaches. I work with some coaches who are brilliant. I work with coaches who are brilliant and a pain in the ass. And like, if they're critical, that's great. It means that you have to be stronger in your opinion. But ultimately, you're there to try and improve performance, and everyone is doing that. Everyone is trying to win. So as long as you can align yourself to the goals of the coach and move their vision towards your vision, and you can provide the variables or the knowledge to help them achieve that vision, ultimately, I don't think it should be that difficult. And the trade-off comes with, yeah, well, I have to give in time, for example, as head coach. Like, I had to give you 30 minutes. Okay, you can have, I want 30 minutes from the coach twice a week, but you can have a gym session back. So I'm taking that same hour, I'm just distributing it. If you want, you can have Wednesday, Thursday afternoon, like go do shot training, or whatever. So I think that's kind of like it's a negotiation method eventually to try and get the goals aligned to what you both want, as opposed to me as a strength and conditioning coach, sports scientist, coming in and being like, right, we need to do Olympic lifting and we need to do high volume training, and they need to be absolutely destroyed the whole time. If those things don't align with the coach, then you're just going to clash. But if you can align your goals together, and I think being adaptable is really important in that, if you can align your goals, then it shouldn't be a difficult conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's always a tough road to go down, because I mean, you come in as a strength and conditioning coach and a sports science, and you're knowing the science behind of like what the importance of this to help them become better athletes, and then the coach really thinks that you really only need to be practicing on like the things that are specific to their sport, and we just need to practice to get better. There's so many little pieces that go into it, but you're also working with the Paralympics, right? So what was the transition into that, and how did you get into it, and what has been your training style with them?
So how I got into it was I rolled into it. I mean, I didn't set out at some point and be like, I really want to work with wheelchair basketball. I didn't even know that existed when I was like 18. So, which, by the way, if people are listening and they're interested in it, amazing sport. Like, watch that at the Paralympics. It's insanely fun. And if you ever get a chance to do it as well, like sitting in a wheelchair and like going and playing, unbelievable fun. Like your
So
hands get
you've
torn
done
to
it.
shreds, but like yeah, for sure. Like your
So
hands get torn to shreds, but it's so much fun.
So like, they're buckled in, and you got to like actually like I've seen like TikToks on it and everything, but I don't know how they do it. Yeah.
So I'll explain the sport, right, and then I'll come back to the question of like how I rolled into it. Like, the sport, you get 14 points on a team. Depending on your level of disability, you get classified, and a team has those 14 points to spend on their on-court players. So, for example, there are players who would have a lower leg amputation. They would be classified as like a 4.5 point athlete. So the disability is lower leg amputation, but the level of this disability is pretty limited for the sport, right? Like, yes, it's there, but it doesn't really affect the sport that much. So you're worth a lot of points in the field. All the way up to, let's say you have a spinal cord injury here. Those people will be like worth 1 point, for example. And that's someone with a disability where actually you can pretty much only just push here, and obviously you've got your arms to throw and catch and shoot. But you can't have that forwards lean, so you're less quick on the pitch. You're limited in what's possible. And the beauty of that is both teams have to choose players from different categories. So you've got people playing against people with various different disabilities, super inclusive. So you have to have people from different places and different ability levels to play. And that makes a super interesting game for the neutral. So like as a spectator, lovely. I want to watch that. But also for the players themselves, because you can mismatch, you can do tactical shifts. Like there's lots of different things that are going on there. And the rest is pretty much the same, right? Like you're not allowed to just ram into each other. You can make contact, but you have to be like still. Otherwise, it's rugby, and it's insane. But the rest is the same. Like the basket's the same height, the balls are the same. You can push twice on the wheels, and then you have to dribble. Otherwise, it's traveling. Like everything's pretty much the same rules. It's just that you're doing it lower. And it's
I'm trying to think about pushing. I'm trying to think about pushing and dribbling at the same time. Like that takes a little bit of.
It's difficult.
Yeah, and think about like shooting from a chair like all the time at a 10 feet goal. Like, yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah. Like honestly, watching people shoot threes, I'm like, this is insane. This is like normally you get kind of that whole body movement to get up in the air and shoot, and like now it's like push momentum, and somehow you have to feel that momentum. And how much momentum is going to get into the ball, and you're still shooting threes.
I might be shooting like Sean Marion, like over the fucking head and shit.
Into the crowd.
Yeah.
But so that's the sport, and I thoroughly recommend it to anyone. That the Paralympics are coming up in a few months' time. If you watch one thing, watch that. Amazing entertainment. But to answer your question, how I got into that, so I came from team sports. I came from the football world. So I did that internship that I mentioned with Vitesse Arnhem. I moved to Dubai for a year with a football team. So I worked there as head of academy, strength and conditioning, sports science. Then moved back to the Netherlands, did another internship, this time with the Olympic team. And off the back of that, I got work with table tennis, paracycling, and handball. So it's like a good place to start. Handball is obviously a team sport that's pretty similar to what I was doing already. And then at some point, because I had table tennis, which is able-bodied and Paralympic at the same time, I'd got a couple of para teams, and wheelchair basketball needed a coach, and they were like, "Look, this is a medal program. Handball is not a medal program. You're working with the talent teams. Like, can you shift across?" And it was a difficult conversation, but eventually I shifted across. And at that point, I'm pretty much exclusively working with Paralympic athletes, and that was 4 or 5 years ago now. 5. And after that, you kind of just get more and more of the same, right? Like, oh yeah, you know about how to work with people with this disability. Go and work with badminton. Badminton leave, and they're like, oh, okay, well, ski snowboard needs someone. They got some great athletes there. Can you help them with your knowledge to improve these performances? So yeah, I rolled into it. Excuse the pun, but yeah, rolled into it, and then after a while, you just keep getting more and more of the same work. So yeah, now it's got to the point where that's all I do. I do exclusively Paralympic work, and obviously you start to kind of burrow down into how to work with people with different ability levels, more specific needs of specific disabilities. So, for example, we'll work with people who a leg amputation is kind of, it's easy. Like you can see what's going on there. You're like, right, okay, that leg is weaker, the hip is weaker, they might get some lower back problems, but that's pretty easy to deal with. Then you've got other people who maybe have a psychological component to their disability. So there's a cognitive element. Maybe you have to get into the science of how you teach someone with a body which works differently and a mind which works differently, how to perform exercises, and how you, for example, work with a guy who had a stroke while playing tennis, and super active, super intelligent, has a stroke, life is completely changed, one side of his body doesn't work, and because it's a cognitive thing, there's a lot of mental components which come with that. And like for the first year, I gave him the same program every week, and every week he'd ask me what the exercises were. And if I didn't understand that situation, like that can be frustrating, right? Like, come on, mate. Like, I told you what bench press was last week. You grab the dumbbell, it's with one arm. You're gonna do this, and as soon as I say it's like, oh yeah, thank you so much, and then he gets on with it, and there's no problem. But it's easy to get frustrated with those things, and I think understanding that there's no. It's not that he doesn't want that. It's not that he doesn't want to understand. It's just that it doesn't work. Like, it's a physiological thing in his brain which doesn't connect those neurons which allow him to say, bench press this exercise. And understanding that's super important. And then the next layer of that is, let's say someone has cerebral palsy. So that's basically, when you're born, it doesn't have to be like this, but when you're born, if you have a lack of oxygen to the brain, then some of that brain gets damaged. And depending on which side that is, depends on which side of your body might be affected. But also, because different sides of the brain do different things, if one side is affected, you can teach someone differently compared to the other side is affected. And using words, for example, might not be the best way to coach someone who has a certain type of disability. Maybe you need to perform in front of them. Maybe that needs to be written down because they can't link those two things. So it can be as simple as, right, you don't do squats because you can't move your legs properly. Or it can be as difficult as you can do everything, but you can't understand it and I have to teach you in a different way. And everything in between. So the adaptability of your coaching just needs to be super high. And I can be someone who's like got a strong vision on how we build up athletes or how we teach or whatever. But if I'm not pragmatic and if I'm not adaptive to the person in front of me, then I can't coach them. Or at least I can coach them, but not very well. I'm not then the best coach for them. So I think those elements are super important to take with you in that kind of Paralympic journey.
Yeah. So, like, with that, like how much has your sports science background helped you to better understand working with the because you come from team sports where technically guys are capable of it, or guys and girls are capable of doing everything, right? But at the same time, like a lot of athletes that have no disabilities have those same problems with learning or understanding like an exercise or what is working for, what is doing. Like how's like your background of like knowing so much sports science like helped you in this avenue now?
I think that the most obvious one is just reading, and being like fairly critical of the papers as well. So, like you can, as far as I'm aware, there's no textbook which tells you how to do all of this. It's just like learn the science and then apply that science. So, if I read a huge meta-analysis on spinal cord injury and what happens, I mean, I can skip a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of stuff which is like it's not particularly interesting, not particularly relevant. But when it comes to like the physiology of that and like understanding, for example, how neuroregulation of blood pressure works, like without that understanding, it's really difficult to write conditioning programs. So, for example, if you have a spinal cord injury, your maximum heart rate drops immediately after that moment. So you can only ever get to a certain amount, and that has different reasons. But without being able to understand that physiology, it's really difficult to program for that person. So let's say, for you guys, let's say your maximum heart rate is somewhere between 190 and 200. If look at some of the people I work with with spinal cord injury, maybe that maximum heart rate is like 160. So you've got a pretty significant drop there. And if I'm like, right, you need to work in 190, we expect that from you, it's not possible. So understanding that only using your upper body requires less muscle mass, for example, and that the neural pathways are limiting you, we can change the conditioning training to be like, right, well, doing that sprint interval is not necessarily getting your heart rate up because you're unable to reach those levels. But if we were to extend that, and we can say, like, instead of doing a sprint interval of 10 seconds and 10 seconds rest, we're going to do like a 4-minute block, which allows you to slowly build that heart rate up. Then we're starting to get the time in certain zones. And yes, it's a different stimulus, but we're able to stimulate that heart rate to a higher level than we were previously. So understanding that physiology is huge. That's just one example, of course, but if you can't read a paper which is not necessarily directly relevant to the sport, it's not telling you what to do, right? Like you're just reading neurophysiology, but if you can't read that and then translate it, then that's a seriously limiting factor. And I mean, I can tell you, having read that, I can tell you how to do this, and you can do the same thing. But there's a difference between providing a training. So, for example, I'm not a powerlifting expert, but I could tell someone how to do some powerlifting training. But because I'm not an expert, when you get into the depths of it, actually, I'm not the right person to do that. So, super important to be able to read potentially abstract theoretical stuff and then apply that to the situation that you're in.
What are you doing to know when your athletes are ready for the like Paralympics and ready for the games, and like how are you testing them, tracking them? Like what are you using? Like what equipment and stuff?
That's a big question. I'm going to try and answer it as quickly as possible. I split it up into the physical characteristics that we want for the sport. So you do a needs analysis and you work out that for a team sport like basketball, wheelchair basketball, aerobic component is important because you're going to need to recover between high intensity bouts. High intensity is important because you have loads of high intensity bouts. Mechanically, you need to accelerate and decelerate very quickly. So we're going to test some sprint stuff. And we need to be strong and robust to be able to deal with high training volumes and game volumes. So with that in mind, we're going to test speed. So 5, 10, and 15 meter starts. We're going to test some kind of repeated sprint or anaerobic test. We're going to test some kind of aerobic test. We're going to test for strength and little bits of individual work around that. So specifically, what we'll do is we have a submaximal yo-yo test, which we've adapted for wheelchair users. So this is a super, again, like I've used it a few times, it's pragmatic because I can test everyone within 30 minutes. Like I'm not putting gas analysis stuff on them. I'm just like, we're going to do a yo-yo test, which is a belief test, backwards and forwards. We've modified the audio, and basically what happens is they start here and they're going to, on the beep, get to the next cone. It's 20 meters, and they're just going to keep doing this. The beeps get faster. We know from their maximal tests what their maximal heart rate is, or from some kind of monitoring that we do with the heart rate every session. So we know what the maximal heart rate is, and we calculate what 92.5% of that is based on literature, and we correspond the time that they get that heart rate to the time that they get that in the test. So we can work out how far they need to go to hit somewhere close to 92.5% of their maximal heart rate. And that's the distance that they're going to go in the submax test. Then they do that. Because that, theoretically, if they hit the time and the distance the same always, it's the same test all the time. And the only thing that changes is the person. So if, for example, they hit the same distance in the same time and their heart rate is lower, that means they've had to work less hard to get that test. And therefore, within reasonable change boundaries, we can conclude that they're getting fitter. Next to that, if they have the same heart rate, but they recover quicker from it, that's also a measurement of their fitness. So we do that once a month, and we track it every first Monday of the month. And we say, right, whole team, if you're going up and down a little bit, of course, daily fluctuations. But if you're trending up or trending down, then we can start to make some interventions. So that would be one example of the testing we do. Again, speed testing, that's pretty simple. I think everyone understands, get quicker. We do a change of direction test next to the speed testing. And that's more about wheelchair skills as opposed to per se direct physiological stuff. And then in the gym, we're looking at things like bar speed. So that's something that we'll measure actually every session. So for the last 5 months, we've hit 3 repetitions at 85% we warm up before that, but like 3 reps, 85%. And we use bar speed using gym wear, and we just track how people adapt to that over time. So ideally, we would see people starting in January and they would go continuously up, and obviously it fluctuates, but to get faster at moving a certain weight. And that means that we don't always have to test for maximum strength, which is pretty fatiguing. So we can hit something which will stimulate a maximum strength adaptation, but without having to really push them to that max the whole time. And we'll still allow them to fail, and we'll still push them, but it just means that we can monitor that regularly without having to have that fatigue cost. So that's kind of a snapshot of some of the stuff we'll do. And then with the direct preparation, we'll put more emphasis on the speed work. So the aerobic stuff, eventually we're not going to be able to, with 10, 12 weeks to go, like we don't have the space, the adaptive resources to be like, right, we're going to do loads of aerobic training. Like we've done that. We need to be working on specific game type training now and tactical and technical stuff. So the aerobic stuff, we're just going to monitor and make sure that they're not dropping off. Allows us to give confidence to the athletes as well. And obviously, as a system, these players, if they retire at any point, we can understand where they were before the Paralympics. The next generation comes through. We're like, well, that person, we don't compare between each other, but we're like, well, if this was how fit we were here and our squad is now here, we need to bring them up, for example. So there's 2 different sides to how you can use that. And again, the focus on the power stuff. So as we get closer to the Paralympics, things like banded bench press bar speed is something that we're going to focus on more. And that's going to drive intent, that's going to drive adaptation, but also it's going to, because we're going to taper at the end. I know from our previous data and previous people that I've worked with, when we taper, they're going to get personal best scores on bar speed for a certain weight. And that gives them a huge confidence boost, right? Like you are the fittest ever before your biggest event. Like that's huge. And I mean, I play into that heavily in the weeks leading up to like our moment of leaving for the games. Like the last session beforehand, it's like we're tapering, they're feeling good, they're feeling fresh, they're producing scores which they're previously able to do. So we'll get together at the end of the session and be like, right, hands up, who's hit a PB on bench speed today? And everyone's putting their hands up and they're looking around like, we're fit, let's go. That kind of stuff it's not just the physical side. Yes, it's a physical side. Yes, it's a sports science side. Yes, we're giving them results, but it's also the psychological side of being like, all right, we're ready now. Like, we prepared well. We're fitter than ever. We're ready to go. Like, all we need to do is shoot baskets.
It doesn't sound like it's too far off from like what we do when you're working with people that aren't in Paralympics, right? Like you're getting them ready for their performance at a big stage, and doing all the factors leading up to it. And like, yeah, physically they're ready, but also there's a huge mental side that like comes into play with it, and like making sure that they feel like they're at their fittest. And when like you go into it sounds exactly the same, but also there's a lot of parts in there that they work. It works differently, right? Like you're working with people that have a little bit of disabilities, but like you're able to correlate it all, and it's very similar to what we're doing. But for guys like Jay and I can speak for myself, like, and then you go from soccer to handball to ping pong to now Paralympics. For any coach trying to break into your industry, what would be your best advice for them?
Yeah, I've got lots of advice, but let's keep it short. I think the thing that gets you in the door is your network and knowing people. But the most important thing in terms of skill development, because ultimately people are not very good at assessing skill. If you want to break in, get a great network, get people to trust you, get great references, and get people to like work for you as such, to give you recommendations. But in terms of skills, develop skills across a range of different sports, and that can be working for free, that can be volunteering at whatever local club you've got. Getting that range of sports in allows you to learn or apply in different places, and ultimately that pretty much gives you the opportunity to be like, oh, I've done this before but with this group, or I've come across this before with this person. And that breadth, especially early career, that breadth of abilities means that you're more able to take opportunities when they come up. So let's say, for example, you only ever work in American football, and you learn a ton of stuff, and you're like, well, I can do all of these things. But if you're being kind of typecast into American strength coach, and my vision, our vision as Europeans of American strength coach is the guy who's a little bit too fat. He's got his chinos on. He's got his polo tucked in. He's bald, goatee. Like, you can see him, right? You guys probably had this coach before.
Yeah.
You got to call him coach. Yeah, there we go. You got to call him coach. You got to be super respectful. And
Sir.
yeah, that kind of stuff. So in Europe, we don't do that. I'm Matt, and I'm like I am now on the podcast. I'm like with my athletes. So unless they're in trouble, and they can kick them the ass. But like, if that's who you are, you're gonna get typecast into being that person, and being able to just like it's like dating world, right? Like, if you have no character, no one's gonna pick you. Like, if you have no discernible something or skills or whatever, no one's gonna be like, oh, I really want to go and spend time with that person. Like, you want to have a coach who's genuinely interested and able to be with you and to like work together. And if you can't have that, then yeah, you're kind of like, I don't know, just like porridge, man. Like, you need to spice up that porridge with some bananas and some fruit and some, like, make it delicious. Don't just eat porridge by itself. So like, bringing a breadth of different experiences and different knowledge and different abilities allows you to then apply that more specifically to whichever group is in front of you. So for me, for example, I worked in football, and the first 2 years of my career were just football. But then I came to the Olympic team, and I was interning with like 9 different sports, hundreds of athletes. And that gives you kind of a breadth. And because despite being just in football, I've been to different countries, that gives you a different understanding and a different breadth. So understanding different cultures, being in different places, and being able to appreciate what you do have in the Netherlands, a developed country where you get paid on time and no one's angry at you, and the athletes turn up on time, and it's like, this is a breath of fresh air. Like, I've got a salary on the dot on the right day, and people turn up on time for their sessions, and they're not like, they can be grumpy or whatever, but they're not just actively not doing it. Like, they don't have to speak to the team manager and fine people for not turning up. Like, they want to be here. So being able to then grasp those opportunities due to your different experiences, that's a big differentiating factor. as opposed to just doing one thing, being really good at that one thing, niching down, brilliant. But early career, then you're only going to ever get those opportunities. And if you want to break into different places and work with different athletes, different sports, different people, then it's pretty logical to me to try and work with different athletes in different places with different sports and different people.
Dope, man. And before we get out of here, because I know we all got super busy schedules, we got our 90-second round, one-word answers. This was not in the little cue card, right? Could have to surprise you with this one, right? So we got 90 seconds, one-word answers, about 8 different questions. It's going to be all across the board, bro. So are you ready for it?
Let's go.
All right, here we go. 90 seconds on the clock. Favorite post-workout snack?
Protein shake.
Favorite soccer team?
Everton. What a club.
Pizza or burger?
Both.
Well, I never heard anyone. Yeah, nobody's ever said that one. That's man. Top athlete you've ever trained?
Oh, it's like 2. Can I mention? No, I can't do that. That's harsh. No, I can't say one person because there's too many. Too many great athletes.
Best Paralympic team?
Women's wheelchair basketball, Netherlands.
Best coach in the industry?
Strength and conditioning, sports science. Which industry?
Let's go strength and conditioning.
Best coach that I've ever seen work was a guy called Christian Bosse. He's German, and he was able to produce an unbelievable generation of talent in track cycling.
What is your number one flaw as a coach?
Poor jokes.
Would you rather be in a ring with a gorilla, tiger, or a bear?
Tiger.
And that is it. The 90 seconds is up. I appreciate you, bro. Thank you for coming on and dropping some knowledge. Super excited to hop on your podcast next with the sport, Science for Sport. All right, so look forward for us being on there and look forward for this episode dropping. And if you have a chance to check out the Paralympics this summer, go ahead and check out the Netherlands Paralympic basketball team and all their Paralympic athletes that they have going on. And you might see Coach Matt out there on the sideline. Appreciate you, dog.
Thank you very much, guys.